Hi everyone, here's a look at the PM18 at Barber Motorsport Park. The track temp is 86 and I'm using Julian's Barber B set, which I found to be very stable around here. Although this track needs a lot of performance from the car, I find if it's a bit snappy you can lose a lot of time. There's quite a few slow corners where you're putting the car at quite a wide angle with low downforce, so you have to be comfortable in the car to push it. Now I'm braking at about the 1 marker and turning in. You want to bring the car into a nice tight line through this inside curb. Get as close to the curb or slightly touch it if you can. If you miss that inside curb and you have to turn in from a bit wider angle, you have to then bring the car back to the left and back to the right. And it's quite important to keep the car as straight on entry into that right-hander as you can, because it dictates your pace up that first straight. So bring the car into the left-hand corner. Try and bring it back to the mid-track, just holding on the brake slightly to keep it steady. I am tapping the brake just to kind of hold the momentum into the right-hand corner, because you don't want the car to drift out too far wide as you've got to bring it back. So you're holding a nice sort of medium line, but at all times keeping the car pointed towards the inside apex. Just waiting for you to get in the throttle. Then you go. On that run through there, I was probably a little bit wide, which actually started through turn 1. I didn't quite get this apex as nicely as I'd wanted. I would have liked to touch it with the front left wheel. It just ran a little bit wide of that, which all actually starts from your braking point, turning point on turn 1. And because of that, I had to bring the car a bit more left than would have been ideal, which meant it never really captured that nice tight line through here. It was about 1/2 to 1/10 off my optimal, but it was still a pretty decent run. There wasn't any significant loss. If you catch that inside curb through 1 and the car bounces, or you get a bit of understeer or oversteer through here, you can actually lose quite a bit of time. 2 or 3 tenths can evaporate pretty easily. Got a nice run up. Now I'm braking the car around the 2 marker here, which is not a super late braking. However, it's quite important when you're going onto this entry into this inside corner to keep the car flat and stable. If you brake super late, I find that the car tends to pivot towards its nose, and then when you go to turn it in, when the weight is already shifted forward, the back just wants to spin around. Now the set I'm using is quite stable, which helps with this, but I'm just focusing on entry here, not giving it quite as much brake as I could, but keeping it fairly just flat and not unsettled, so that when you turn in, the turn in goes smoothly. And you can steer off the corner nicely. So really, this braking zone, the left-hander, then the acceleration zone out, all get treated as one, and the car sort of balance and behavior affects all 3 of them. If the car is locked up on turn in, you're going to have to probably overthrow it in, which is going to cause further oversteer, and then when you go to apply the throttle, the car's really going to want to come around. So I understand I was probably being a little bit conservative with this braking marker. I could actually push that further, and when I get a bit more practice, I probably will. But it allowed me to bring the car into the actual inside curb, which is the line you want to take. You don't want to be running too wide. You want to aim at this curb and get a nice narrow line, and the car gets very close to that, and get the second apex, and then just smoothly release the steering input as you accelerate out. And the car will try and oversteer on throttle. There's nothing you can really do, but you've just got to be a bit aware that if you give it too much throttle too quickly, it will do that. But you also don't want to be too easy on the throttle, as you could lose a fair bit of time on exit. So just nice and smooth. Not too much oversteer, but wasn't super light in the throttle either. Now in here, I'm braking and turning around the 1 marker. This is a very important corner to get this first apex. You've got to get the car close to the first right-hand apex, because then you can brake it in a straight line and sort of over the downward curb. if you're wide of this apex, you're going to be chasing the car back to the sort of downward, I guess, left apex, which will muck up your whole section through here. So braking, turning in around the 1 marker, trying to get this nice first apex, and when I do, getting on the brake and trying to brake the car in a straight line. Now I'm releasing the steering lock because I want it, when traveling down through this section, to be straight, and just holding it through this section and then turning it in. And you want to carry your momentum through that right-hander and then accelerate hard out. And again, if you keep the car nice and stable, you shouldn't be getting too much any sort of movement through these apexes. It should be clipping that nicely, getting the wheel straight, then getting hard on the brake to brake it in a straight line over this apex, then throwing it into this right-hander. I wouldn't recommend using too much curb as it can unsettle it. And then I've got a nice exit, which pushes up this back hill. In fast motion. Now on this lap, I used a little bit too much curb on this second apex. I'm finding just to open the line, it's alright if you put the front wheel just slightly up on these curbs. However, this one I used a bit too much. That's more than you want to use. That was actually quite a bit up on the curb, which would have cost me a little bit of momentum. You'd want to use about half that much ideally. The car shouldn't be this far over to the right, but it didn't actually cost me too much, maybe a few hundredths. And in the race, I'd probably recommend against using too much. Maybe just minimize the curb use, because it's quite possible it could pick up some floor damage or front wing damage if you hit them too hard. Although if you open the line a little bit, it does add a bit of track distance. So on the out-to-out qualifying lap, I would still probably use them. In the old Pro Mazda, I didn't have to, but it had a front end that could turn the corners quite simply, and it wasn't under load. In this one, if you miss these curbs, it feels like you're turning a fair bit right on the second apex. That was still okay, but I prefer not to use the curbs that aggressively. Now you're turning in about just after 1 marker here. It's another unsighted apex, but it's very important to hit the apex because your next right hand is dependent on it. If you're not far enough to the left here, then you're going to have a narrower turn in through here, which will actually make the car understeer on entry and oversteer on exit. You could actually end up out in the grass. So you're wanting to get really close to that curb, probably not hit it because you don't want to unsettle it, but get close. Then you're turning right and doing roughly the same thing here. And you're just waiting to get really hard back on the throttle. And the car will sort of oversteer as you do it, but you just got to anticipate it and be ready to catch it. Now this curb here is flat. I do not lift through it. And then I'm preparing into this next right-hander. Now this is another corner that's very important not to overshoot, because if you overshoot it, you've got to bring the car back to the right, then you'll be on a narrow entry to the next left-hander. So just take it a bit easy. Make sure you bring the car into this apex here. You want to be getting it just to touch that right apex nicely, and then continue to bring the car back to the right. And then you're preparing to turn left for acceleration into the final start-finish straight. And you want to bring the car again and just touch that apex. Then you accelerate out. A 16.0. This is actually quite a technical track, Barber, and it's very important that the car be stable. So if you're finding that after you've got 30 or 40 laps under your belt, just so that you've got the proper rhythm, if the car's still moving a lot at the rear and you're not having any confidence to turn in, probably dial some understeer into it. This is a track you want to have a more understeer focused aero setup than Suzuka, which you really could have the car oversteering just to get at that last bit. But here it's all about accuracy, and if you are having to correct the car mid-corner a lot, then it's possible to run offline and lose yourself time. Now I'll just do it in full speed.